Earlier this week, we had the opportunity to interview the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Angela Rayner, about two of her flagship bills, the Employment Rights Bill and the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. We thought it'd be best to split the interview into two parts. In the first, we asked questions about the Employment Rights Bill, and in the second, we asked questions about the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. When we first sat down, I wanted to know why the Deputy Prime Minister had decided not to equalise pay between 18 to 20-year-olds and those 21 years and over on the minimum and living wage.
So what we did is we wrote to the Low Pay Commission because I feel that at the moment the wages are really low and that there needed to be a review that took into consideration real cost of living and also to start closing that gap. We couldn't do it in one big swoop because we had to listen and take into account what the Low Pay Commission said about making sure that the employability, employers will often say, well, we won't take a chance on the young person and train them up. So we're closing that gap, as you say, is the biggest increase for 18 to 20-year-olds to £10 an hour. And we've increased the minimum wage for 21-year-olds to £12.21. So there are big increases. There has been some criticism, with other measures that the government have had to take. But this is about investing in our people and the money that they get in their pocket, especially if you're on the minimum wage. You spend it all. You don't have any left at the end of the month. So you're spending it in the local economies, and we know that high streets are struggling as well. So I actually think it helps the economy, it helps local high streets, and it supports people in good jobs.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the sort of money going into people's pockets, and this increase in the minimum and the living wage this week comes at the same time that some people's finances are being stretched even further with an increase in water bills and energy prices and council tax. In fact, Citizens Advice stated that these increases will hit single parents the hardest. How would you respond to criticism that the Employment Rights Bill doesn't go far enough to protect people on the lowest incomes from these increases?
Yeah, we get criticisms on both sides, to be fair. And I think what the Chancellor tried to do in the budget is put more money in working people's pockets. She protected them from the big tax rise. She said working people won't pay more money. They're not paying more money as a result of that. In April of every year, tax, there is increases. The previous government had increased things like council tax a lot more than we did, and we capped it. But we also knew that they didn't invest in council services, so the leisure centres were closing, councils were going bankrupt. So we have to stabilise funding. So we put more money into councils from central government, more money into the NHS because people can't get even to see their GP. So we had to invest in our public services. And the water system, again, the Tories were allowing literally sewerage to go into our rivers, and the water companies were making huge profits and putting the prices up. What we did in the new Water Acts that we brought forward was that the investment that's going in there now will stop the sewerage going into the sea, will allow us to build the homes that young people desperately need, because the planning reforms are one thing, but actually we need reservoirs, we need water treatment, etc., so that we can build those 1.5 million homes. So there's a lot of structural changes we've made, and the energy bills, what Ed Miliband is doing on energy will mean that we will have energy security. So first of all, we're not at the mercy of the international markets like Putin. The war in Ukraine sent the cost of gas going through the roof and everyone's paying for it. If we do renewables and we invest in that now, people will get good jobs for the future, and we will bring down energy bills and we'll have energy security because we're relying on overseas to get it.
Yeah, and I suppose just at the start of that, you were sort of referencing the two groups that I suppose you're being pushed on with the Employment Rights Bill, and I'll get on to the sort of second, I suppose the businesses in a second, but just sticking with the criticism that it doesn't go far enough, I suppose, for workers. One of the things that I saw that the government had previously pledged to introduce was a right to switch off, and it was noticed that this wasn't included in the Employment Rights Bill. How come it doesn't feature?
Because I don't think we need to do it in primary legislation, so we can do guidance. We've updated around flexible working, and it's also about a cultural shift. I think most employers know that contacting your employees continually out of work is not acceptable, but pragmatically, if your boss had an emergency and wanted to contact you, then I'm sure most people would be like, no, that's fine. But if you're constantly being, harassed at home outside your working hours, there's other ways of combating that as well. But having guidance that takes that pragmatic approach and protects people, like the measures we put in around flexible working. So default employers have to say yes unless there's a clear business. So it flicks it on its head. So employers have to say yes unless there is a genuine business reason to say no. That will have a huge impact on people's work-life balance. And, the pandemic's shown us that we could work in different ways that we never thought we could work. So when the push comes to shove, we can do it. And the best employers know this and do it already. So I'm just trying to have a balanced approach to the legislation, but change the culture where I understand some employers are worried about and think, oh, this is too much, too burdensome, it won't work. But it does work, and small businesses understand it works for them, and large corporations understand it and it works for them. So I'm trying to share the knowledge and evolve the workplace so that people can say, you know what, actually, we can look at this differently, and it will increase productivity. It'll increase the retention rates of staff, so you're not paying more money out with staff turnover. You have happier staff, therefore they're not as ill, and therefore it's good for business and it's good for workers.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and I suppose that's the argument for the what the bill is doing towards workers. But there's been, as I mentioned, there's some criticism on the other side, and some of the criticism has come from businesses and employers. So the V5 Club of business groups are reportedly drafting a letter in response to the bill, where they claim that it's a recipe for damaging, not raising living standards, and that further compromise is needed to avoid damaging the economy. How do you respond to those sort of arguments?
Well, I respond to it in that lots of businesses are already doing what the Employment Rights Bill says. As you said, I've had criticisms from both sides, so I really feel like I've probably hit a sweet spot. And therefore, it's about showing and telling how this can work. So, small businesses, large businesses, lots of them know in a competitive field, having good staff relations and welfare is really important. So having flexibility, paying your staff a wage they can actually live on. I mean, a living wage is not asking for much, and that's independently verified. It's not a wage that I've dreamt up. It's one that the Low Pay Commission says is what people need to live on. And the ability to look after your staff means they'll look after your business. And the best, most highly functioning businesses know this. And in fact, they go further than the Employment Rights Bill. So I want to see a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. And that's what we've seen. And it's left people really insecure at work. And it has, if you can't afford, or you don't know what your money's going to be at the end of the month because you don't know what your hours are going to be, if you don't know if you're going to have a job at the end of the month because you don't know if they're going to keep you on or not because you're on a 0-hour contract, or your boss can fire you and rehire you on less pay, that creates this level of fear and anxiety that has a real impact on your day-to-day life and your ability to get on. So I think the fairness argument is one that is reasonable, and the measures in this bill are not about, being damaging to the economy. It's about growing the economy and supporting those employers that know this already. I didn't dream it up. I've worked with employers, I've worked with the workers and the trade unions, and I think this is the good landing zone to make sure that we get this right.
So the main thing is that you feel like you've struck that balance between the sort of...
I think so. So one example is, employers said to us, I said rights from day one, and some of the rights will come in, like the sick pay, for example, which I think, COVID showed us again, we don't want people who are poorly going into the workplace and making everyone else ill. And you can't choose just because you've been in the job 3 weeks when you're going to get unwell. So I think these are reasonable steps.
Yeah.
And employers can manage people through a sickness process if someone's off all the time. So I dispute that argument as why we can't do that. But during the pandemic, we saw people were working very differently. So I think there's a fairness argument to making sure that we protect people. But employers said, well, if we don't have probationary period, we're less likely to take a risk on giving someone a chance, for example. So we listened to that and we allowed a probationary period of 9 months, but with some protections, like, for example, sick pay, because I don't think you should have to wait 9 months to know if someone's good for a job or not, on whether or not these core protections should be in place for every worker.
Of course. So just very quickly moving on to the planning infrastructure bill, I know that this is sort of distinct. Could you just give us a brief overview of what it aims to do and how it will interact with the housing crisis?
So we've done a lot of reforms since I got in. So we got the National Planning Policy Framework, which is a big document that tells you all about planning and how you do it, a guidance document. And then the Planning and Infrastructure Bill will be streamlining the planning process. So it'd be about where planning happens, what types of planning, and making it more sort of rules-based for some key planning decisions. So a brownfield site, for example, if you follow certain rules, then you would be able to go through the planning process a lot quicker. It also allows for big national infrastructure programs. At the moment, what happens, it's first come, first served, whereas actually they might not be ready to move that infrastructure program forward. So what it allows us to do is prioritize national infrastructure so we can bring them forward in the queue, for example. And it's also increasing capacity by allowing local authorities to charge the right rates for planning. That means they'll get more planning officers. So instead of waiting several years for a planning decision to get a major development up and running, they'll be able to do it a lot quicker.
Yeah, interesting. You've sort of outlined there the sort of process and how that will sort of help with speeding up decisions. Some of the criticism that I've seen, though, is that reduce the ability, I suppose, for local people and local councils to have a say on these planning decisions. Do you sort of agree with that criticism, and do you think you sort of struck the right balance with that?
I think it'll make smart decisions. So at the moment, it's a bit higgledy-piggledy. You can have many different dibs for different reasons. And therefore, you can get calling on decisions because somebody thinks something's not right. Whereas actually, if it's followed the rules, it just seems completely a really silly way of doing things. So actually having mandatory housing targets where every single local authority has to have a local plan. So that means right at the beginning, councils have to decide where houses can be built with consultation with local area. Then it says these are the rules you have to follow to build those houses. So you've got them, and that should make it better because developers know, well, I can't put a planning application in for there because that's not on the local plan, so it's not going to get approved. And this is the rules I have to follow. So they have to be beautiful houses, they have to be like this for me to get through the planning process. So instead of it being more subjective, some local councillors in a room saying, oh, I'm not sure about that, someone might not like it, but actually having a process where it's planned in advance with consultation with local areas means that, for example, a lot of the time it's like, well, we're not getting, how's the school's going to cope if we've got all these new houses? Well, if you plan it in advance, you can make sure that school is part of the plan. So it should make it a better process for people. At the moment, it just goes on around and round in a circle. And the frustration is that we're all still talking about the housing crisis and it's still getting worse because we haven't made the process more clarity and better for people as part of that. So it's not about taking decisions away. It's about smart planning.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll speed some of the decisions up as well.
Absolutely.
But, Deputy Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much.
As you'll have noticed on our other videos on this channel, the world is an uncertain place, often with few easy solutions. Unfortunately, this can be the case online too. There are all kinds of bad actors out there that want to try and use you to make a quick buck. Take, for instance, data brokers. They sell your data to businesses and marketing agencies, leading to more spam calls, texts, and emails. Or, even worse, they can sell your data to even worse actors, who can then go on to use your identity. Some data brokers have even been charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud for intentionally supplying data lists of elderly and vulnerable people to scammers. Fortunately, today's sponsor, Incogni, can help to rectify this. They work on your behalf to request your personal data removal. They also deal with any objections, and to make sure that your personal information isn't shared by the broker again, conduct repeated removal requests. And with their friends and family plan, they will even do this for you and up to 3 of, well, your friends and family. So create an account with our link in the description, granting Incogni the ability to work on your behalf and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, by using our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Thanks for checking it out, and thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.